The ocean was a merciless beast, its black depths devouring the dawn's feeble glow. 217 kilometers from any shore, in a realm where hope drowned, a German shepherd waged a desperate war against the waves. His paws thrashed, clawing at the icy void, his drenched fur a heavy chain pulling him under. Yet his eyes, wild, haunted, burning with a defiance that could shame the stars, locked onto some unreachable salvation. Each choked whimper sliced through the sea's cruel roar, whispering a mystery that would chill your blood. Who abandoned him to this watery hell? Why? The truth, a gut-wrenching, soul-shattering saga of loyalty, will leave you breathless. Don't look away. This story will haunt you, inspire you, and demand to be shared. Thomas Grady's weathered boat rocked gently on the restless sea, the horizon a blurry line of gray under a heavy sky. At 42, the Florida fisherman had seen his share of oddities. Sharks circling too close, storms brewing from nowhere. But nothing like this. 6 hours into a routine trip, his eyes caught a flicker in the distance, a speck that didn't belong. He lifted his binoculars, squinting, and his breath hitched. A German shepherd, its head barely above the churning waves, paddled with a desperation that clawed at Thomas's gut. "What the hell?" he murmured, his voice lost in the wind. The dog was a ghost in the water, its fur plastered against a trembling frame, legs churning against the ocean's pull. Thomas's heart thudded, a primal rhythm drowning out the gulls overhead. This wasn't just a stray, it was a survivor fighting a battle no creature should face. The dog's eyes, even from this distance, gleamed with a stubborn will that hit Thomas like a punch. How long had it been out here? Days? Hours? And why was it alone? 217 kilometers from any shore. His calloused hands gripped the boat's throttle, the engine roaring to life as he steered towards the impossible sight. The sea fought back, waves slapping the hull, but Thomas's focus was razor sharp. He didn't know this dog, didn't owe it anything, yet something in its struggle stirred a fire in him. He'd lost plenty in his life, his wife to cancer, his son to a city far away. But this he could save, or so he hoped. The closer he got, the worse it looked. The German shepherd's movements were slowing, its head dipping dangerously low. Thomas leaned over the edge, his voice cracking as he shouted, "Hold on, boy, just hold on." The words felt futile, swallowed by the vastness, but he kept calling, willing the dog to hear him. The boat rocked wildly, salt spray stinging his eyes, but he didn't blink. He couldn't lose sight of those eyes, that flicker of life refusing to fade. The dog was close now, close enough for Thomas to see the exhaustion carved into its frame. Its paws barely broke the surface, and for a terrifying moment, Thomas thought he was too late. His heart pounded like a drum, each beat screaming urgency. He cut the engine, the sudden silence deafening, and scrambled for a rope. The boat swayed as he leaned out, arm outstretched, his fingers brushing the dog's soaked fur. "Come on," he whispered, voice thick with something he couldn't name. The dog's head turned, its gaze locking with his, and in that instant, Thomas felt it, a connection, raw and unspoken, like the dog was pleading for him to be its anchor. With a grunt, he looped the rope around the dog's torso, his muscles straining as he pulled. The German shepherd was heavier than he'd expected, dead weight from exhaustion, but Thomas didn't falter. He hauled with everything he had, the boat tipping dangerously. For a moment, the sea seemed to hold its breath. Then, with one final heave, the dog tumbled onto the deck, a trembling, sodden heap. Thomas dropped to his knees, his hands shaking as he checked for signs of life. The dog's chest rose faintly, a shallow rattle of breath, and Thomas exhaled, relief crashing through him like a wave. But as he looked at the creature, ribs stark against its sides, a faded collar half buried in its fur, new questions burned. This wasn't just a rescue. This dog had a story, one that had led it to the edge of oblivion. And Thomas, whether he meant to or not, was now part of it. What had this animal endured? And what would it take to bring it back from the brink? The sea was a living beast, its waves clawing at Thomas Grady's boat with relentless fury. The German Shepherd, now barely a shadow in the water, was slipping away. Its legs twitched feebly, its head dipping beneath the surface for too long. Thomas's pulse thundered in his ears, each beat a countdown to a life he refused to lose. He didn't think, didn't pause to weigh the risk. The dog had minutes, maybe seconds. With a ragged breath, he tore off his jacket and dove into the icy abyss. The water hit like 1,000 knives, stealing his breath and stinging his skin. Waves crashed over him, pulling him under, but Thomas fought, his arms slicing through the chaos. In the distance, the German Shepherd's glazed eyes flickered, a fading ember in the dark sea. Thomas swam harder, his muscles screaming, his lungs burning. "Hold on," he gasped, the words lost to the wind. Slow-motion moments stretched as he closed the gap, the dog's faltering paddles growing weaker, its body sinking. Those eyes, though, those eyes still held a spark, a plea that locked onto Thomas and wouldn't let go. He reached the dog just as its head slipped under again. His fingers grazed sodden fur, then clamped down, pulling the limp form against his chest. "I've got you, buddy," he whispered, voice raw with salt and desperation. The shepherd's weight was crushing its body slack, but Thomas held tight, kicking against the current. Waves battered them, the sea raging as if cheated of its prize. His free arm clawed at the water, dragging them toward the boat, every stroke a battle against the ocean's wrath. The boat loomed closer, a battered sanctuary rocking wildly. Thomas's strength was fading, his limbs heavy, but the dog's faint, shuddering breath against his shoulder kept him moving. He reached the hull, his fingers slipping on the slick edge. With a guttural yell, he heaved the dog upward, pushing its limp body onto the deck. It landed with a wet thud, motionless. Thomas scrambled after, his own body screaming as he collapsed beside the animal, panting, soaked, and trembling. For a moment, the world was just their ragged breaths and the sea's mocking roar. Thomas's hand shook as he crawled to the dog, fear twisting his gut. Was he too late? The German Shepherd lay still, its ribs stark beneath drenched fur, its eyes half closed. Thomas pressed a hand to its chest, feeling for life. A faint, stuttering heartbeat answered. "Come on," he urged, voice cracking. He grabbed a tarp from the deck, wrapping it around the dog's shivering frame, tucking it tight to trap what warmth remained. The dog's head lifted slightly, a weak movement, and Thomas's chest ached with relief. "You're a fighter, aren't you?" he said softly, his hand resting on the dog's flank. The words sealed something between them, a bond forged in the crucible of survival. The dog's eyes met his, clouded but alive, and Thomas felt a weight settle in his soul. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a pact. He didn't know this animal's past, didn't know what had driven it to this edge of existence, but he knew one thing. He'd fight for it now. The deck was slick with seawater, their breaths steaming in the cold air, but they were alive, both of them. The ocean had tried to claim them, and they'd spit in its face. As Thomas sat there, the dog nestled against him, he noticed the faded collar again, half hidden in matted fur. A tag glinted faintly, etched with a name he couldn't yet read. Who did this fighter belong to? What story had led to this moment? The answers were out there, waiting, and Thomas was ready to chase them, no matter where they led. The German Shepherd lay curled on Thomas's boat, the tarp cocooning its trembling form, but its amber eyes, sharp, haunted, told a story that refused to stay buried. Thomas knelt beside the dog, his rough hands gentle as he traced the raw, bloody pads of its paws, torn as if it had clawed through hell itself. The faded collar half eaten by salt and time, dangled loosely, its rusted tag catching the dim light. A single letter, R, was all that remained, the rest scratched to oblivion. Thomas's fingers lingered on it, his brow furrowing. Who was this dog, and how had it survived 217 kilometers in an ocean that spared no one? Flashes haunted him, images of the dog swimming alone, its legs churning through endless waves, head barely above the surface. Those moments flickered in his mind like a fever dream, each one raising more questions. No collar held a name, no microchip lay beneath the dog's matted fur, just that R, a taunting fragment of a life left behind. Was it abandoned, cast into the sea by some heartless soul? Or was it running, fleeing something darker? The dog's gaze met his, those amber eyes flickering with a secret that felt alive, urgent, as if pleading for Thomas to keep digging. He'd taken the dog to a vet clinic near the Florida coast, the boat's engine still cooling as he carried the shivering creature inside. The vet, a gray-haired woman with steady hands, examined the shepherd with a frown that deepened by the minute. She pressed a stethoscope to its chest, her eyes widening. "His heart's strong," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "But his body's been through hell. Malnourished, dehydrated, muscles torn like he's been fighting for weeks. This dog's no ordinary stray." Thomas leaned forward, his pulse quickening. "What do you mean?" The vet shook her head, glancing at the dog's raw paws and the broken tag. "He's been somewhere he wasn't meant to survive." The words hung heavy, stirring a chill that had nothing to do with the clinic's sterile air. Thomas's mind raced, piecing together fragments. The dog's condition spoke of endurance beyond reason. Days, maybe weeks at sea. But how? No boat could drift that far without being spotted. No dog could swim that distance without a miracle. The R on the tag gnawed at him, a clue to a past someone had tried to erase. He pictured a shadowy figure slipping the collar loose, casting the dog into the waves to hide a truth too dangerous to keep. The thought tightened his chest, anger mixing with a fierce need to protect this creature. Back on the boat, the dog stirred, its head lifting to watch Thomas with unnerving intensity. Those amber eyes seemed to carry memories of storms, of betrayal, of a fight that hadn't ended. Thomas brushed a hand over its fur, feeling the faint scars beneath. "What happened to you, R?" He murmured, the name slipping out naturally. The dog's ears twitched, a spark of recognition, and Thomas's heart skipped. It wasn't much, but it was something, a thread to pull, a mystery to chase. The vet's words echoed, "No ordinary stray." The dog's survival was a puzzle, each piece hinting at something bigger, something hidden. Was R a name, Rex, Ranger, Riley, or a marker of something else entirely? A person, a place, a secret. The broken tag felt like a warning, as if someone had meant for this dog's story to sync with it. But Thomas wasn't letting go. He'd saved this fighter once, and now he'd fight for its truth, no matter how deep it was buried. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the deck, Thomas knew one thing. The dog's past held answers that could change everything, and he was ready to find them, even if it meant facing a darkness neither of them could outrun. The cabin smelled of cedar and salt, a quiet refuge from the sea's cruelty. Thomas sat cross-legged on the worn floor, his broad shoulders hunched as he offered a strip of grilled chicken to the German shepherd he'd named Ranger. The dog's amber eyes, still wary, tracked Thomas's every move, but hunger won out. Ranger inched forward, snatching the meat with a gentleness that belied his battered frame. Thomas smiled, a rare softness cracking his weathered face. "That's it, Ranger," he murmured, voice low and steady. "You're safe now." The dog's tail flicked, a hesitant truce forming in the flicker of firelight. Days had passed since the rescue, and Ranger's strength was returning. His ribs were less stark, his fur less matted, but those eyes, sharp, searching, never fully relaxed. Thomas saw it in the way Ranger followed him, always a step behind, to the dock where the boat bobbed lazily. There, Ranger stood alert, ears pricked, scanning the horizon as if expecting something, or someone. Thomas watched, a knot of curiosity tightening in his gut. This wasn't just a dog. Ranger moved with purpose, like a soldier awaiting orders, his every step measured, disciplined. The cabin became their sanctuary, a place where trust grew in small, hard-won moments. Thomas shared his meals, spoke to Ranger about the tides, his late wife, the son who never called. Ranger listened, his head tilted as if absorbing every word. One evening, as the sun painted the sky crimson, Thomas tossed a stick along the shore. Ranger didn't chase it. He sat, rigid, awaiting a command that never came. Thomas frowned, the mystery of Ranger's past clawing at him again. "What were you trained for, boy?" he asked, half expecting an answer. The question lingered until Mike, a retired K-9 handler and old friend, stopped by. Lean and grizzled, Mike's eyes lit up when he saw Ranger. "Hell of a dog," he said, crouching to study him. Ranger's gaze locked onto Mike, unblinking, as if recognizing something familiar. Mike's expression shifted, curiosity giving way to suspicion. "Let's try something," he said, standing. Without a word, he raised a hand, fingers forming a sharp, silent signal, a tactical command from his military days. Thomas held his breath. Ranger's ears twitched, and in an instant, he dropped to the ground, lying flat, eyes fixed on Mike. Thomas's jaw tightened. "What the hell was that?" Mike didn't answer right away, his gaze still on Ranger. "That," he said finally, "was a K-9 response, military grade. This dog's been trained for something serious. Search and rescue, maybe detection." Ranger rose slowly, returning to Thomas's side, but the air had changed. Thomas muttered, "You're no ordinary dog, are you?" His hand rested on Ranger's head, feeling the weight of a truth he wasn't sure he wanted. Mike's voice dropped, laced with warning. "Dogs like this don't just end up in the ocean, Tom. Someone wanted him gone. You keep him, you're inviting trouble." The words hung like a storm cloud. Thomas looked at Ranger, now lying by the hearth, his steady breaths a quiet defiance of the sea that nearly claimed him. Every step closer to Ranger's past felt like a step toward danger, but Thomas didn't care. This dog had fought for him, and he'd fight for Ranger, no matter who or what came knocking. The warmth of the cabin couldn't fully chase the chill creeping into Thomas's bones. Ranger's training, his instincts pointed to a life of purpose cut short. Why abandon a dog like that? What mission had he been on, and who had betrayed him? As the fire crackled, Ranger's eyes met Thomas's, a silent vow passing between them. They were in this together now, bound by survival and something deeper, but the truth was out there, and it was closing in. The cabin's dim glow barely reached the corners where shadows clung like secrets. Thomas hunched over an old laptop, its screen casting a sickly blue light across his face. Ranger lay at his feet, amber eyes fixed on the door, ears twitching at every creak of the wind-battered walls. The R on Ranger's tag had led Thomas here, to a favor called in from an old fishing buddy with access to restricted military databases. His fingers trembled as he typed, each keystroke pulling him deeper into a world he didn't belong in. Then the screen flickered and a file loaded, Operation Nightmark classified. Below it, a single corridor. Asset R7, presumed lost at sea, March 12, 2025. Thomas's breath caught. Ranger wasn't just a dog. He was a secret, a ghost from a covert mission, marked as lost 3 days before Thomas had pulled him from the ocean. His eyes darted to Ranger, now rising, a low growl rumbling in his throat. The dog's gaze was locked on the window, where darkness pressed against the glass. Thomas followed his stare, heart thudding. Headlights sliced through the night, a black SUV idling outside, its engine a soft snarl. Ranger's ears pinned back, his body taut, every muscle coiled. Thomas's stomach twisted. Someone had wanted Ranger gone, erased from existence, and now they'd found him. They'd found them. "Easy, boy," Thomas whispered, but his voice shook. He grabbed his keys and a flashlight, the cabin suddenly too small, too exposed. The SUV's doors opened, shadows moving in the dark, and Ranger's growl deepened, a warning that vibrated through Thomas's bones. He didn't know who they were, military, mercenaries, or worse, but he knew one thing: they weren't here to talk. He shoved the laptop into a bag, his mind racing. Operation Nightmark, Asset R7. Ranger had been part of something big, something worth killing for, and Thomas had just cracked it open. They slipped out the back, the wood swallowing them as the SUV's lights swept the cabin. Branches clawed at Thomas's arms, Ranger silent and swift beside him, moving like a shadow trained for stealth. The air was thick with pine and fear, the night alive with sounds, crickets, wind, and, faintly, the thrum of a helicopter. Ranger froze, his body dropping low, eyes hard and distant, as if that sound dragged him back to a nightmare. Thomas crouched beside him, his heart lurching. "What did they do to you?" he whispered, his hand on Ranger's flank, feeling the dog's trembling beneath his scars. That chopper wasn't random. It was tied to Ranger's past, to the mission that had left him for dead. The woods offered cover, but not safety. Quick glimpses of their escape flashed. Thomas's boots sinking into mud, Ranger's ears flicking at every snap of a twig, the helicopter's rotors growing louder. Thomas's mind churned. Operation Nightmark had been buried deep, a Black Ops project tied to coastal security, maybe smuggling or worse. Ranger, Asset R7, had been no ordinary K9. He'd been a weapon, trained to detect, to protect, to survive. But why abandon him? What had he seen or done that made him a liability? The answers were in that file, but Thomas hadn't had time to read it all. He only knew one thing: whoever was behind Nightmark didn't leave loose ends. They reached a ravine, the helicopter's searchlight cutting through the canopy above. Ranger's growl was a low hum, his body pressed against Thomas's leg, ready to bolt or fight. Thomas's chest heaved, determination burning through his fear. He'd saved Ranger once, and he'd do it again. But the truth was closing in, a noose tightening around them both. Whoever wanted Ranger dead wasn't just after the dog. They wanted the secret he carried, and Thomas was now part of it. As the chopper's roar faded, he knew they couldn't run forever. The past was hunting them, and it was only a matter of time before it caught up. The rocky cove was a jagged fortress, its cliffs swallowing the crash of waves below. Thomas crouched behind a boulder, his breath shallow. Ranger pressed against his side. The German shepherd's fur bristled, his amber eyes locked on the horizon, where a black helicopter descended, its blades slicing the night with a relentless thrum. The searchlight swept the shore, a predator's gaze hunting them. Thomas's hand rested on Ranger's flank, feeling the dog's steady heartbeat despite the danger closing in. They'd run as far as they could, but the past had found them. Now it was time to stand. The chopper landed on a flat outcrop, kicking up sand and salt. A figure stepped out, a handler, clad in dark tactical gear, his face obscured but his presence cold, commanding. He held a small device, and with a press it emitted a high-pitched whine that pierced the air. Ranger whimpered, his ears flattening, body trembling as if the sound dragged him back to a cage Thomas couldn't see. Thomas's jaw clenched, rage flaring. "Easy, boy," he whispered, but his voice shook with fury. They'd hurt Ranger before, trained him, used him, discarded him, Not again. Two armed men fanned out from the chopper, their boots crunching on the rocky shore. Ranger's whimper turned to a low growl, his body tensing. Thomas gripped a heavy stone, his knuckles white. The handler raised the device again, the whine sharpening, and Ranger's head lowered, his eyes darting with pain. Then something snapped. Ranger surged forward, a defiant bark tearing from his throat. Raw and unyielding, he lunged at the nearest pursuer, teeth bared, slamming into the man's chest. The soldier stumbled, his rifle clattering to the ground as Ranger pinned him, growling with a ferocity that echoed through the cove. Thomas didn't hesitate. He charged the second man, tackling him into the sand before a shot could ring out. Fists flew, the fight a blur of adrenaline and desperation. Thomas's shoulder burned as a blow landed, but he held firm, protecting Ranger. The handler's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and clinical. R7, return. Ranger froze mid-growl, his head twitching towards the command. The device's whine still humming. For a heartbeat, Thomas feared they'd lose him, that the training, the pain, would reclaim Ranger's soul. But Ranger's eyes found Thomas, and something shifted. His tail flicked, a small, deliberate sign of trust. He turned from the handler, planting himself beside Thomas, his growl deepening, a line drawn in the sand. Thomas rose, chest heaving, and faced the handler. "He's not your asset," he shouted, voice carrying over the wind. "He's Ranger, and he's home." The words were a vow, a claim, and Ranger's tail flicked again, his body steady, choosing Thomas over the chains of his past. The handler's eyes narrowed, but Ranger's defiance, his bark, his stance, shook the air. The soldiers hesitated, their weapons lowering. Ranger wasn't a tool anymore, not a weapon to be recalled. He was a soul, loyal and free, standing with the man who'd fought for him. The handler pressed the device once more, but Ranger didn't flinch, his growl a final rejection. The man's shoulders sagged, a flicker of defeat. He signaled the soldiers, and they retreated to the chopper, its rotors spinning back to life. As the helicopter lifted, its searchlight fading into the night, Thomas dropped to his knees beside Ranger. The dog's nose nudged his hand, warm and solid, and Thomas laughed, a choked sound of relief. "You chose me," he whispered, his fingers burying in Ranger's fur. The cove was quiet now, the waves a soft hymn to their victory. They'd faced the shadow of Ranger's past and won. Not with guns, but with loyalty, with trust. Ranger was home, and no one would take him away. The cabin stood steady against the coastal breeze, its weathered planks now a beacon of sanctuary. Thomas pushed open the door, Ranger padding in beside him, no longer the trembling ghost pulled from the sea. The dog's fur gleamed, his frame filled out, but it was his eyes, clear, bright, no longer haunted, that told the real story. Thomas knelt, fastening a new leather collar around Ranger's neck. The tag glinted, engraved with one word, Ranger. No codes, no shadows, just a name, claimed and cherished. Ranger's tail thumped softly, a quiet thank you, and Thomas's chest warmed with a peace he hadn't known in years. They'd faced the hunters, defied the past, and come out whole. Operation Nightmark's secret still lingered out there, but they couldn't touch this, couldn't touch the bond forged in a cove under a hunter's moon. Thomas had lost much in his life, but Ranger had given him something back, a reason to keep going, a partner to share the quiet days. The cabin, once a lonely refuge, was a home now, filled with the clink of Ranger's tags and the soft thud of his paws on the floor. On a quiet morning, they walked to the beach, the sand cool beneath their feet. The ocean, once a merciless foe, stretched calm and endless, its waves whispering forgiveness. Thomas tossed a ball, and Ranger bounded after it, tail wagging freely, a joyful bark echoing across the shore. He wasn't the soldier of Operation Nightmark, not the asset R7 trained to obey. He was Ranger, chasing a ball because he could. living because someone believed he was worth saving. Thomas laughed, the sound raw and full, as Ranger dropped the ball at his feet, eyes sparkling with mischief. For the first time, they were just a man and his dog, unburdened by the weight of secrets. Days turned to weeks, each one stitching their lives tighter. Thomas taught Ranger to sit for treats, though the dog's military precision made it half unnecessary. Ranger taught Thomas to listen to the silence, to find solace in the rhythm of the tides. They'd walk the docks, Ranger trotting proudly at Thomas's side, his new collar catching the light. Fishermen nodded, their gruff smiles a quiet respect for the dog who'd defied the odds and the man who'd brought him back. At sunset, they'd sit on the porch, the sky ablaze with gold and crimson. Ranger's head rested on Thomas's knee, his breaths slow and steady, a contented sigh slipping out as the last light faded. Thomas's hand settled on Ranger's fur, tracing the scars that told a story of survival. "You're home, boy," he said softly, the words carrying the weight of a promise kept. Ranger's eyes closed, his body easing into a peace he'd earned. In that moment, the world was right, simple, whole, and theirs. Ranger didn't just survive the sea or escape a shadowed past. He found where he belonged, rewriting his story with every wag of his tail, every trusting glance. He was no longer a code, no longer a weapon lost to the waves. He was Ranger, a dog who'd chosen his own path and found a man who chose him back. Their story, born in the heart of a storm, proved one unshakable truth. Sometimes all it takes is one soul believing another is worth saving, and in that belief, both can find a home. As the stars emerged, Thomas leaned back, Ranger's warmth grounding him. The ocean sang its endless song, but it no longer held their fear. They were safe together, and that was enough. The world could keep its secrets. Ranger's heart beat strong and Thomas's beat with it, a rhythm of hope that would carry them forward side by side. The screen flickered with Ranger's journey, a lone German shepherd battling endless ocean waves, his eyes fierce with survival. Thomas's arms pulling him from the abyss, their breathless collapse on the boat. Ranger standing defiant in the cove, choosing loyalty, and finally his tail wagging wildly as he chased a ball on a sunlit beach. Text glowed, "Share Ranger's story, celebrate second chances." The voiceover, warm and earnest, spoke. Ranger's journey shows us that no one is too lost to be found. Share his story with someone who needs hope, and let's honor the survivors who remind us to keep fighting for second chances. The music swelled, uplifting and bright, fading with the gentle crash of waves and Ranger's soft, joyful bark.